My daughter-in-law grabbed the custom glasses my late wife had specially made for me, held them up with a cruel smile, and snapped them in half right in front of my face. "Maybe now you'll finally see your place in this house," she said, laughing, while her parents watched, and my own son looked away in silence. I bent down slowly, picked up the broken pieces, and said nothing. She thought she had won. She thought I was just a weak old man too broken to fight back. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my wife had prepared for this moment before she died. Those glasses weren't just glasses. They were watching. They were recording. Every cruel word, every humiliation, every scheme whispered behind closed doors had been captured, and that was only the beginning. Because when I finally revealed what those glasses contained, my daughter-in-law's smirk turned to pure terror. Her own mother abandoned her in front of everyone. My son, who had been silent for years, finally stood up and exposed her darkest secrets. And the woman who thought she could destroy me discovered that my dying wife had built an unbreakable fortress around everything she tried to steal. If you think you know where this story is going, you're wrong. There are 7 twists coming that will leave your jaw on the floor, and the ending will give you the satisfaction you've been waiting for. But you have to stay until the very last moment, because the biggest revelation comes when you least expect it. This is not just a story about revenge. This is about dignity, about a love that protects from beyond the grave, and about what happens when you push a quiet man too far. My name is Walter Bennett. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer designing bridges and buildings that would outlast the men who built them. I believed in foundations and things that endure, in the quiet strength of structures that hold weight without complaint. I never imagined that the structure I trusted most, my own family, would be the one to crumble beneath me. The morning before everything changed, I woke early as I always do and walked out to Rosemary's garden. She planted those roses the year we moved into this house, and even though she's been gone 3 years now, I tend them every day. It's my way of talking to her, I suppose. I trim the dead leaves, check the soil, whisper things I never got to say before. The cancer took her. That morning the blooms were just opening, red and white against the green, and I thought how she would have loved to see them. I adjusted my glasses, the custom frame she had made for me during her final months, and I could almost hear her voice. "These are special, Walter, more than you know. When I'm gone, they'll watch over you." I never quite understood what she meant, but I wore them every day like a promise. By evening, the house was full of noise. Madeline had invited her parents for dinner, Patricia and Frank Lowell, and the air was thick with their laughter and the clink of expensive wine glasses. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, helping where I could, trying to be useful without being seen. That's what I had become in my own home, a ghost who paid the mortgage. My son Nathan barely looked at me when I entered the dining room. He was too busy agreeing with whatever Madeline said, nodding along like a man who had forgotten he ever had a spine. Dinner was roast chicken. Madeline's favorite, though I had prepared most of it while she took credit. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat closest to the kitchen, the seat farthest from conversation. Patricia was telling some story about a vacation home they were considering, and Frank was making comments about investment properties and asset management. Madeline laughed too loudly at everything her father said. Nathan smiled on cue. I ate in silence, watching them perform for each other, wondering when exactly I had become invisible. It happened when I reached for the water pitcher. My hand brushed a wine glass and it tipped, spilling red across the white tablecloth like a wound. The conversation stopped. Madeline's face went cold the way it always does before she strikes. "Honestly?" She said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Can you not do one simple thing without making a mess?" I apologized, reaching for a napkin, but she was already on her feet. She came around the table fast, and before I understood what was happening, she snatched the glasses right off my face. "These ridiculous old things," she said, holding them up. "You can barely see with them anyway. You're blind to everything, Walter. Blind to how much space you take up. Blind to how much you cost us. Blind to the fact that nobody wants you here." Then she snapped them. Right there in front of everyone. The frames cracked. The lenses popped out and shattered on the hardwood floor, and she dropped the pieces at my feet like trash. "Maybe now you'll finally see your place in this house." The room went silent. I looked at Nathan, waiting for him to say something to defend me, to remember that I am his father. He looked away. Patricia smirked into her wine glass. Frank shook his head like I was a dog who had soiled the carpet. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was my own breathing, slow and steady, as I bent down and picked up the broken frames. I held the pieces in my hands, feeling the weight of them, the sharp edges where the lenses had cracked, and I remembered Rosemary's words spoken from her hospital bed with a certainty I didn't understand at the time. Those glasses will protect you when I can't. Trust me, Walter. Trust Arthur. I had thought it was the morphine talking. I had thought she was being sentimental. But holding those broken frames, feeling something hard and small hidden inside the twisted metal, I began to wonder if my wife had been planning for this moment all along. I said nothing. I let them think I was broken. I let Madeline feel powerful, and Patricia feel superior, and my own son feel justified in his cowardice. But inside something shifted. Something woke up. I looked at the broken glasses in my hands, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt Rosemary beside me whispering, "Now, Walter, now it begins." That night I sat alone in the room Rosemary and I once shared, the broken glasses resting on the nightstand beside her photograph. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept drifting backward to the man I used to be, to the life we built together, before grief hollowed me out and left only this quiet shell behind. I picked up her picture, traced the curve of her smile with my thumb, and remembered when Walter Bennett was not a man who bent down to pick up broken things. I remembered when I was the one others looked to for strength. I met Rosemary in the summer of 1978 at a construction site in downtown Houston. She was an architect consulting on the project, and I was the young engineer everyone warned her about. "He's stubborn," they told her. "Doesn't back down, doesn't play politics." She walked right up to me that first day, blueprints in hand, and said, "I hear you're difficult to work with." I looked at her, this woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, and replied, "Only when people are wrong." She laughed, and that was the beginning of everything. We were married within a year, and for the next 4 decades we built a life the same way we build structures, with precision, with care, with foundations meant to last. I was not always silent. There was a time when my voice carried weight, when people listened because they knew I spoke only when it mattered. I remember one incident clearly, maybe 20 years into my career. A young engineer on my team, a man named David Reeves, made a calculation error that could have delayed a major project. The company executives wanted to fire him on the spot, make an example. But I had reviewed the situation, and I knew the truth. The error came from faulty data provided by management, not from David's incompetence. They were looking for a scapegoat, someone to blame, so they wouldn't have to admit their own mistakes. I stood in that boardroom surrounded by men in expensive suits who controlled my salary and my future, and I refused to let them destroy a good man's career for their convenience. "You fire him," I said, "and I walk, and I take the real story with me." They backed down. David kept his job, eventually became a project manager himself. He sent me a card when I retired, thanking me for the moment that changed his life. That was who I was. That was the man Rosemary married. But grief does strange things to a person. When Rosemary died, something inside me went quiet. The world felt muted, like I was watching my own life through frosted glass. I stopped fighting because fighting felt pointless without her beside me. I let Madeline's comments slide because responding required energy I no longer had. I told myself I was keeping the peace, preserving the family, being the bigger person. But I see now what I couldn't see then. I wasn't keeping peace. I was surrendering. And Madeline, with her predator's instinct for weakness, saw my grief and mistook it for submission. She thought my silence meant I had no voice left. She thought my stillness meant I had no fight remaining. She was wrong. The memory came to me unbidden that night, sitting in the dark with Rosemary's picture in my hands. Her final days in the hospital, when the cancer had taken everything except her mind. She was so weak by the end, barely able to lift her head, but her eyes still burned with that fierce intelligence I fell in love with decades ago. She made me lean close, her voice a whisper I had to strain to hear. "Walter, listen to me. If anything happens after I'm gone, if they try to take what's ours, find Arthur Whitman. He knows what to do. Promise me." I promised, though I didn't understand. Then she said something else, something I dismissed as medication-induced confusion. "The glasses, Walter, the ones I had made for you, they're more than glass. Remember that. Arthur will explain." I held her hand and told her I understood, but I was lying. I didn't understand at all. I thought she was saying goodbye in her own way, leaving me with riddles, because she couldn't bear to leave me with nothing. Now, holding the broken frames, feeling that small, hard object hidden inside the metal, I wondered if Rosemary had been clearer than I ever gave her credit for. I set down her photograph and walked to the old desk where we kept our important papers. Somewhere in these drawers was every letter she ever wrote me, every card, every note. I searched for an hour, pulling out memories wrapped in yellowed envelopes until I found what I was looking for. A letter dated 6 months before her diagnosis, addressed to me but never sent. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter spoke of many things: of her love for me, of her fears for the future, of her suspicions about Madeline that she had never voiced aloud. But one line stopped my breath. Arthur Whitman is the only man I trust as much as you. If I'm ever not there to protect you, he will be. I have made sure of it. I read that line 3 times, trying to understand what she meant by made sure of it. What had Rosemary done? What had she prepared? I was still holding the letter when my phone rang, cutting through the silence like a blade. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in months, a name I hadn't thought about since Rosemary's funeral: Arthur Whitman. My hand was steady as I answered. "Walter?" Arthur said, his voice calm and deliberate. "We need to talk. Rosemary left instructions. It's time you knew what she planned." Arthur's office was located in a modest building on the quieter side of Houston, away from the glass towers and bustling traffic of downtown. I arrived the next morning, having barely slept, my mind churning with questions I had carried for 3 years without knowing they needed asking. The receptionist recognized my name and led me directly to Arthur's door. He stood when I entered, and for a moment we simply looked at each other. Arthur Whitman was 62, a few years younger than me, with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that made you trust him before he spoke a single word. He had been Rosemary's attorney for nearly 2 decades, and I remembered now how she always insisted on handling legal matters herself, how she would visit this office alone and return with papers she filed away without explanation. I had never questioned it. I trusted her completely. Now I understood she had been building something I was never meant to see until I needed it. Arthur gestured to a chair and closed the door behind us. "Thank you for coming, Walter. I know this is difficult." I sat down, the broken glasses still in my jacket pocket, a weight I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. "You said Rosemary left instructions," I replied. "I need to understand what she did." Arthur nodded and opened a folder on his desk, spreading documents across the surface like a map to a territory I never knew existed. "Before she died," he began, "Rosemary created what's called a living trust. The Rosemary Bennett Living Trust, to be exact. She placed the house, your savings accounts, your investment portfolio, and several other key assets under its protection. Legally, these things don't belong to you directly, Walter. They belong to the trust, and the trust has very specific conditions governing how those assets can be accessed, transferred, or claimed." I stared at the papers, trying to absorb what he was telling me. "I don't understand. The house is in my name. We bought it together 40 years ago." Arthur shook his head gently. "It was in your name. Rosemary had it transferred to the trust 18 months before she passed. She did it quietly, legally, without alerting anyone. The same with your bank accounts and retirement funds. On paper, you're the beneficiary and the trustee, which means you control everything as long as you're alive and competent. But the assets themselves are shielded. No one can take them from you through manipulation, coercion, or fraud. Not Nathan, not Madeline, not anyone." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Rosemary knew Walter. She saw what Madeline was long before any of us did. She set this up specifically to protect you." I thought of all those visits to Arthur's office, all those papers Rosemary filed away, all those times she told me not to worry about the details. She had been constructing a fortress around me, brick by brick, while I remained blissfully unaware. "But why didn't she tell me?" I asked. Arthur's expression softened. "Because she knew you would have stopped her. You would have said it was unnecessary, that families should trust each other, that Nathan would never allow anything to happen to you. She loved you too much to let your faith in others leave you vulnerable." He leaned forward slightly. "The trust has what we call protective clauses. They remain dormant under normal circumstances. But if there's ever documented evidence of abuse, exploitation, or fraud against you, those clauses activate. Full protection. Complete asset lockdown. Anyone attempting to harm you financially or otherwise would find themselves legally exposed and entirely shut out." Documented evidence. The words echoed in my mind. I reached into my pocket and touched the broken frames, that small, hard object still hidden inside. Rosemary had thought of everything. She always did. When I returned home that afternoon, I found an unexpected visitor waiting on my porch. Patricia Lowell sat in one of the wicker chairs, a pleasant smile on her face as though she had simply stopped by for tea. I hesitated at the sight of her, remembering her smirk as Madeline shattered my glasses, but she rose gracefully and extended her hand. "Walter, I hope you don't mind. I wanted to speak with you privately." Her tone was warm, almost gentle, nothing like the cold amusement I had seen the night before. I invited her inside, wary but curious. She settled onto the living room sofa and folded her hands in her lap. "I want to apologize for last night," she said. "Madeline can be intense. She gets that from her father, I'm afraid. But I've always believed that families should support each other, especially across generations." I watched her carefully, trying to read beneath the polished surface. "What are you saying, Patricia?" She sighed, as though burdened by her daughter's flaws. "I'm saying that perhaps I should speak with her, teach her to be gentler, more patient. Our family has always known how to protect assets, how to manage wealth across generations, but management doesn't have to mean cruelty." She met my eyes with what appeared to be sincerity. "I understand you, Walter, more than you might think." For a moment, I almost believed her. Perhaps Patricia was different from her daughter. Perhaps she saw what Madeline had become and wanted to correct it. But then she added almost casually, "Family wealth requires careful management, of course. The older generation doesn't always understand the pressures the younger ones face. Sometimes they hold on too tightly and it creates conflict." The words hung in the air, and something cold settled in my stomach. I smiled and thanked her for her concern, and she left with promises to help smooth things over. But as I watched her car pull away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just been assessed, measured, tested for weakness. That evening, I called Arthur and told him about Patricia's visit. He listened in silence, then said quietly, "Walter, there's something else Rosemary left. A video message recorded in her final weeks. She made me promise not to show it until we had proof, until there was documented evidence of what she feared would happen." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of proof?" Arthur's voice was steady but serious. The kind that would hold up in court, the kind that would activate every protective clause she put in place. He paused. "Are you sure you want to wait for them to destroy themselves? Because once this begins, there's no going back." I told Arthur I would wait. Patience had become my nature over these past 3 years, and I saw no reason to abandon it now. If Rosemary had built a fortress around me, she had also built a trap for those who would try to breach it. All I needed was to let them walk into it themselves. But waiting, I discovered, brings its own revelations. Some truths hide in plain sight until you are quiet enough to see them. The days following my meeting with Arthur passed slowly. I kept to my routines, tending Rosemary's garden, preparing meals. No one thanked me for staying invisible in my own home. Madeline treated the broken glasses incident as settled, as though shattering something precious required no apology, no acknowledgement. Nathan avoided me more than usual, finding reasons to leave rooms when I entered, burying his face in his phone during meals. I watched him carefully now, this son I had raised, and I began to see things I had refused to see before. It was on a Thursday evening that the past came flooding back. I was in the hallway outside Nathan's home office, having gone to ask him a simple question about a utility bill, when I heard voices through the partially open door. Nathan was on the phone, and something in his tone made me stop. "I can't stand up to him," Nathan said, his voice low and strained. "You know what I owe him. If he ever found out the full truth, if people knew what really happened." There was a pause, and I recognized Madeline's voice on the other end, sharp and dismissive, though I couldn't make out her words. Nathan continued, almost pleading, I know, I'm doing everything you asked. Just give me more time." I stood frozen in that hallway, my hand inches from the door, and suddenly I was transported back 15 years to the worst secret I had ever kept. Nathan was 30 then, ambitious and impatient, convinced he had inherited his mother's business instincts without any of the caution that tempered her decisions. He came to me one evening, pale and shaking, and confessed that he had invested $80,000 of his savings into what turned out to be a fraudulent investment scheme. The money was gone. His credit was destroyed. He was facing potential legal consequences for unknowingly participating in what authorities were investigating as a pyramid operation. I remember the fear in his eyes, the way he kept saying he was sorry that he didn't know, that he had trusted the wrong people. I told him we would fix it together. I told him no one needed to know. I took out a second mortgage on the house Rosemary and I had paid off years earlier. I liquidated a portion of my retirement savings. I hired a lawyer who quietly negotiated Nathan's cooperation with investigators in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The entire matter was settled within 6 months, and I never spoke of it again. I didn't tell Rosemary the full extent of what I had done because I didn't want her to worry. I didn't tell Nathan's employer or his friends or anyone who might judge him. I carried that debt silently because that is what fathers do. We protect our children even from the consequences of their own failures. But standing in that hallway 15 years later, listening to my son speak of what he owed me as though it were a chain around his neck. Rather than an act of love, I understood something that broke my heart more thoroughly than any pair of glasses ever could. Nathan had never seen my sacrifice as grace. He had seen it as leverage, and somewhere along the way, Madeline had discovered this secret and turned it into a weapon. She controlled him not through love or respect, but through the threat of exposure, the fear that his father might finally see him for what he was. His silence at the dinner table, his refusal to defend me, his constant capitulation to her demands, none of it was simply weakness. It was the behavior of a man being blackmailed by his own wife. I stepped back from the door before Nathan could notice me. My legs felt heavy as I walked to the living room and sat down in the chair by the window, the same chair where Rosemary used to read in the evenings. I thought about all the times I had defended Nathan over the years, all the excuses I had made for his passivity, all the hope I had clung to that he would eventually find his courage. I had been protecting him his entire life, and he had learned nothing from it except how to remain protected. Later that evening, Nathan found me in the garden. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across Rosemary's roses, and I was trimming dead leaves with the slow precision of a man with nowhere else to be. He stood at the edge of the flower bed, hands in his pockets, looking more like a guilty child than a 45-year-old man. "Dad," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I know I owe you more than I can ever repay." I looked at him, searching for something in his face, some sign of the boy I had raised, the son I had believed in. "What exactly are you sorry for, Nathan?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't say it. Even now, even standing in his mother's garden with the weight of years between us, he couldn't bring himself to name the truth. He simply shook his head and walked back inside. I watched him go, this man who shared my blood but seemed to have inherited none of my backbone. For 45 years I had protected this boy, covered his mistakes, defended his choices when others questioned them, and he had repaid me with silence when it mattered most, with cowardice when courage was required. I closed my eyes and let the evening air wash over me. I protected the wrong person, I whispered to Rosemary's roses, but maybe it's not too late for him to choose differently. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery where Rosemary rests. It was early, the sun barely risen, the air still cool with the remnants of night. I needed to be somewhere quiet, somewhere I could think without the weight of that house pressing down on me. More than that, I needed to talk to my wife. The living may not hear the dead, but I've always believed the dead hear us. And there were things I needed to say that only Rosemary would understand. Her grave sits beneath an old oak tree, the headstone simple and elegant, just as she would have wanted. I brought fresh roses from her garden, the red and white blooms she loved most, and placed them in the small vase embedded in the ground. Then I lowered myself onto the stone bench nearby, feeling every one of my 70 years in my knees and back. And I began to speak. "I don't know if you can hear me," I said softly, "but I think you knew this day would come. You always saw things before I did. You saw Madeline for what she was. You saw Nathan's weakness. And you prepared for all of it while I was too blind to notice." The wind stirred the branches above me, and I imagined it was her response, gentle and patient as always. My mind drifted back to our 40th anniversary, a milestone I had wanted to celebrate with something grand, a trip to Italy perhaps, or a party with all the friends we had accumulated over 4 decades of marriage. But Rosemary insisted on something quiet, just the two of us, dinner at home, followed by an exchange of gifts. I gave her a pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. She gave me a small velvet box, and inside were the glasses, custom frames, she explained, designed specifically for my face with lenses ground to my exact prescription. I remember thinking they were handsome, but wondering why she had gone to such trouble for something so practical. She must have seen the confusion in my expression, because she took my hands and looked at me with an intensity that made my heart ache. "These are special, Walter," she said. "More than you know. Arthur helped me design them. When I'm gone, they'll watch over you." I laughed and told her she wasn't going anywhere, that we had decades left together. She smiled, but didn't argue. 3 months later, she was diagnosed with cancer. I wore those glasses every day after she passed. They became my connection to her, a physical reminder of her presence in my life. When Madeline broke them, she didn't just destroy an object. She destroyed a sacred link to the woman I loved, and I had done nothing. I had bent down and picked up the pieces like a defeated man, like someone who had forgotten what dignity meant. Sitting at Rosemary's grave, I remembered the promise I made to her on our wedding day, and again on countless occasions throughout our marriage. "I'll never let anyone take our dignity," I had told her. "Not mine, not yours, not ours together." But I had broken that promise. Every time I swallowed an insult from Madeline, every time I accepted Nathan's silence, every time I retreated into invisibility to keep the peace I had betrayed, the vow I made to the woman who trusted me with her heart. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the headstone. "I let grief make me small. But I understand now what you were trying to tell me. I understand what you left behind." I reached into my pocket and touched the broken frames I still carried everywhere. "I'll finish what you started, Rosemary. I promise." My phone rang as I sat there, and Arthur's name appeared on the screen. I answered, and his voice was calm but serious. "Walter, I've been thinking about our conversation. There's something else Rosemary left, something beyond the trust documents. A recording, a video message she made in her final weeks. She was very specific about when I could show it to you." I gripped the phone tighter. "What were her instructions?" Arthur paused before answering. "She said I could only reveal it when we had documented evidence of mistreatment. She didn't want you to simply inherit her protections, Walter. She wanted you to fight for them. She wanted you to reclaim your own dignity before she stepped in to help." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of her foresight, the layers of her planning. Even dying Rosemary had been thinking not just of my safety, but of my spirit. She knew that a man handed victory feels differently than a man who earns it. That evening back at the house, I went through the old desk in our bedroom, the one where Rosemary kept her personal papers and correspondence. I was searching for something, though I wasn't sure what some additional piece of the puzzle she had left behind. Near the bottom of a drawer, tucked inside an envelope with my name written in her elegant script, I found a note. The paper was fragile, the ink slightly faded, but her words were clear. "The glasses see what you cannot. Arthur will explain when the time comes. Trust him as you trust me. And remember, my love, I would never leave you unprotected." I read the note 3 times, each reading revealing new meaning. The glasses see what you cannot. I had dismissed her anniversary words as poetry, as the sentimental expression of a loving wife. But Rosemary was never merely sentimental. She was precise, deliberate, strategic. If she said the glasses would watch over me, she meant it literally. If she said Arthur would explain, then Arthur held answers I had not yet thought to ask for. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my wallet close to my heart. The next morning, I returned to Rosemary's grave one final time before the day's obligations called me home. The roses I had left were still fresh, their petals catching the early light. I stood before her headstone, the wind carrying the familiar scent of her favorite blooms, and I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer weighed me down. It lifted me up. "I understand now," I said softly. "You never left me unprotected. You just wanted me to fight for myself first." The days that followed felt different. I moved through the house with new purpose, no longer drifting like a ghost, but observing like an engineer, surveying a structure for hidden flaws. Rosemary had taught me to look beneath surfaces, to question what seemed solid, to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. And something about Patricia's visit continued to trouble me. Her words had been kind, her manner sympathetic, but there was a calculation behind her eyes that I couldn't forget. She had assessed me that day, measured me, and I needed to understand why. I began organizing the old files in our home office documents that had accumulated over decades of marriage and family life. Rosemary had always been meticulous about record keeping, and after her death, I had simply added to the piles without sorting through them. Now I worked methodically, creating order from chaos, and in doing so, I discovered things that had been buried for years. Bank statements, tax returns, correspondence, all of it telling the story of a life built on careful planning. But it was in a folder labeled Nathan and Madeline that I found what I wasn't looking for. The folder contained documents from their wedding financial records from the early years of their marriage and correspondence that Rosemary had printed and saved for reasons I never understood until now. Among the papers was an email exchange archived and forgotten dated 7 years ago. The sender was Patricia Lowell. The recipient was Madeline. I almost set it aside, assuming it was nothing more than family chatter, but Rosemary had highlighted certain passages in yellow marker. My wife never highlighted anything without purpose. The first email was from Patricia to Madeline, sent shortly after Madeline's grandmother had been moved to a nursing facility. "Don't feel guilty about Grandma," Patricia had written. "She didn't need that big house. I convinced her to sign it over because she couldn't manage it anymore. The doctors agreed she was becoming forgetful, and I simply helped her make the right decision before she made the wrong one. You'll understand someday when you need to protect your own future. The older generation holds on too tightly. Sometimes we have to help them let go." I read the words twice, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Patricia had convinced her own mother to sign over her home. She had used the woman's age and declining memory as justification for what was in plain terms manipulation. I scrolled down to Madeline's response, hoping to find shock or pushback, some indication that the woman who became my daughter-in-law had recognized the wrongness of what her mother described. Instead, I found confirmation. "I know, Mom," Madeline had written. "Grandma didn't even realize what she signed. You were right to do it before she gave everything to that charity she was always talking about. People our age have to take control before the old ones waste everything they built. They don't understand the world anymore. They don't understand value. By the time they figure out what happened, it's too late to undo it, and honestly, they're usually too confused to even try." I set the papers down and stared at the wall, my mind racing through implications I had never considered. This wasn't simply Madeline's nature, some flaw of character unique to her. This was education. This was training. Patricia had taught her daughter how to exploit the elderly, how to justify theft as protection, how to frame manipulation as mercy. The sympathy Patricia had shown me during her visit, the gentle words about understanding me, the suggestion that she might teach Madeline to be kinder, all of it was reconnaissance. She had been assessing my vulnerability, measuring how far along I was in the process of becoming her daughter's next target. I thought back to Patricia's casual comment about family wealth, requiring management about the older generation not always understanding. At the time, I had wondered if it was a slip, a hint of her true nature. Now I saw it for what it was, a philosophy. The Lowell women didn't see what they did as wrong. They saw it as necessary, as practical as the natural order of things. The young take from the old, the sharp take from the trusting. And those who object are simply failing to understand how the world works. The pattern became horrifyingly clear. Patricia had exploited her own mother. Madeline had watched and learned. Now Madeline was positioning herself to do the same to me, with Patricia advising from the sidelines, refining the approach, ensuring the family tradition continued into another generation. The broken glasses, the talk of nursing homes, the pressure on Nathan to sign documents, none of it was impulsive cruelty. It was strategy passed down like an heirloom, polished and perfected over decades. I gathered the emails and placed them carefully in a separate folder, one I would share with Arthur when the time came. Evidence, Rosemary had said. Documented evidence of abuse or exploitation. I was beginning to understand just how much documentation might already exist, buried in files and folders, waiting to be discovered by someone patient enough to look. The irony was not lost on me. Patricia and Madeline believed they were dealing with a confused old man, someone too naive to recognize what was happening, too weak to fight back. They had no idea that my wife had anticipated their every move, had prepared countermeasures years in advance, had left me a roadmap to their destruction hidden in plain sight. I sat alone in the office as evening fell. The emails spread before me, the weight of revelation pressing down on my shoulders. I had spent days wondering if Patricia might be different from her daughter, hoping that perhaps one member of that family possessed a conscience. Now I knew the truth. Patricia wasn't different. Patricia was the source. She had created Madeline, shaped her, armed her with techniques refined through practice on her own mother. The cruelty I had experienced wasn't an aberration. It was a family business. My hands trembled as I gathered the papers, not from fear, but from something colder than anger, something more enduring. I thought of Rosemary highlighting those passages, preserving this evidence years before I would need it, knowing that someday I would sit in this chair and understand exactly what we were dealing with. This isn't just greed, I whispered to the empty room. This is inheritance. They don't see betrayal as wrong. They see it as tradition. I kept the emails hidden and said nothing. The temptation to confront Madeline, to throw the evidence of her family's corruption in her face, burned inside me like a fever. But Rosemary's voice echoed in my memory, calm and strategic as always. Don't interrupt your enemy when they're making mistakes. I'd spent my career as an engineer watching structures fail, and I knew that the most catastrophic collapses happen when pressure is applied to foundations already compromised. Madeline and Patricia believed their foundation was solid. They had no idea how many cracks were spreading beneath the surface. In the days that followed, Madeline grew bolder. My silence, which she interpreted as defeat, emboldened her to accelerate her plans. She called a family meeting one evening, gathering Nathan and me in the living room with the air of a CEO addressing subordinates. I've been thinking about this house, she announced, gesturing at the walls Rosemary and I had painted together decades ago. It's dated. The decor is old-fashioned, depressing, really. I think it's time for a complete renovation. New colors, new furniture, a fresh start. She smiled at me with practiced sweetness. I'm sure you understand, Walter. Holding on to the past isn't healthy. I understood perfectly. She wasn't talking about paint and furniture. She was talking about erasing Rosemary from this house, removing every trace of my wife's presence, every reminder that this home belonged to someone before Madeline decided she wanted it. The rose-patterned curtains Rosemary had sewn by hand. The antique mirror we found at an estate sale on our 20th anniversary. The photographs lining the hallway, 40 years of memories preserved in silver frames. All of it would disappear under Madeline's renovation, replaced by whatever sterile modern aesthetic she deemed appropriate. But she wasn't finished. I've also been researching retirement communities. She continued, her tone shifting to concern, so false it was almost theatrical. For your own safety, Walter. You're getting older and this house has stairs, sharp corners, all sorts of hazards. Wouldn't you be happier somewhere designed for people your age, somewhere with staff to help you activities, to keep you engaged? Nathan nodded along as she spoke, and I wondered if he even heard the words or simply responded to her voice like a trained animal. Later that evening, Madeline produced a stack of documents and placed them before Nathan at the kitchen table. Just some routine estate planning, she explained casually. Our financial advisor recommended we update a few things. Nothing complicated, just signatures where I've marked. Nathan picked up the pen without hesitation, without even glancing at the pages. I watched from the doorway as he signed document after document, his hand moving mechanically, his eyes never focusing on the words he was authorizing. I had seen enough legal paperwork in my life to recognize what those forms likely contained. Power of attorney provisions, healthcare directives, the kind of documents that would give Madeline control over household decisions, over my decisions, if I were ever declared incapacitated. She was building her case piece by piece, and my own son was helping her without even knowing it. I could have stopped him. I could have walked into that kitchen, snatched the papers from his hands, and demanded he read every word before signing. But I remembered what Arthur had told me about documented evidence, about protective clauses that activate only when exploitation is proven. If I intervened now, Madeline would simply find another way, a quieter way, a method I might not discover until it was too late. Better to let her believe she was succeeding. Better to let the evidence accumulate until it became undeniable. During dinner that night, I noticed something that might have escaped my attention before. Madeline refused the wine Nathan offered her, pushing the glass away with a quick shake of her head. Not tonight, she said. Nathan frowned slightly. You've been refusing alcohol a lot lately. Are you feeling okay? Madeline's expression flickered, something unreadable passing across her face before she composed herself. I'm fine, just watching my health. She changed the subject quickly, steering the conversation toward her renovation plans, but I filed the observation away. Small details matter. Rosemary taught me that. As the evening wound down, Nathan mentioned casually that he had purchased a new phone. The technology keeps changing, he said, scrolling through screens with mild frustration. I'm still learning to use all these apps, voice memos, cloud storage, things I need for work. He showed me the recording function, explaining how easy it was to capture conversations, meetings, anything worth remembering. I nodded politely and said nothing, but something stirred in my mind. Nathan with a recording device. Nathan who still looked at me with guilt in his eyes. Nathan who might someday need to make a choice about which side of this conflict he truly belonged to. I watched my son sign those papers, pen moving across each page like a man signing his own surrender. He didn't read a single word. He didn't ask a single question. He simply trusted his wife because trusting her was easier than thinking for himself. I could have stopped it. I could have warned him. But some lessons only land when the student discovers the cost themselves. A week passed before Arthur called me to his office again. His voice on the phone carried an urgency I hadn't heard before, a tension beneath his usual calm that told me something significant had developed. I drove across town with the broken glasses in my pocket, a habit I couldn't seem to break, and found him waiting at his desk with a thick folder open before him. The expression on his face confirmed what I had suspected. The situation was escalating faster than either of us had anticipated. "I've been doing some investigating." Arthur began, gesturing for me to sit. "Quietly through channels Rosemary helped me establish years ago. Financial advisors, legal contacts, people who notice when certain documents get filed." He slid the folder across the desk toward me. "Madeline has been busy, Walter, very busy." I opened the folder and found a collection of records, copies of forms, financial statements, correspondence. Arthur had documented everything the trust structure Rosemary had created. Madeline's recent inquiries into the property value of my home, the documents Nathan had signed without reading. But it was the final item that stopped my breath. "She's contacted a doctor," Arthur said quietly, "a psychiatrist who specializes in cognitive evaluations for elderly patients. She's building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent." He let the words settle before continuing. "If she succeeds, if a court grants her guardianship over you, she controls everything. Your finances, your healthcare decisions, where you live. The trust protections Rosemary put in place would be challenged, possibly overturned. You would become, legally speaking, a child in her care." I stared at the doctor's name on the document, a specialist in geriatric psychiatry whose practice catered to families seeking to manage aging relatives. The same tactic Patricia had used on her own mother. The same playbook refined and repeated across generations. "How far along is she?" I asked. Arthur shook his head. "Early stages. She's gathering evidence, documenting incidents, probably keeping notes on anything she can spin as confusion or instability. The broken glasses incident, your quiet behavior, your withdrawal from family activities. All of it can be framed as cognitive decline if she finds the right expert willing to support her narrative." The irony was almost unbearable. My silence, which I had chosen as a strategy, was being used against me. My patience was being reframed as passivity. Everything I had done to avoid confrontation was becoming evidence that I was losing my mind. 2 days later, Madeline organized a small family gathering, an excuse to show off the renovation samples she had collected. Patricia and Frank attended, inspecting fabric swatches and paint chips as though they were already decorating their daughter's inheritance. I stayed in the corner watching, waiting, and I noticed something I hadn't expected. Patricia pulled Madeline aside near the kitchen, her voice low, but not quite low enough to escape my hearing. "You're pushing too hard, too fast," Patricia murmured, her expression tight with concern. "These things take time. If you rush, you make mistakes. Be careful." Madeline dismissed her with a wave of her hand. "I know what I'm doing, Mother. He's practically handing it to us." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Not moral doubt, but strategic doubt. She wasn't worried about what they were doing. She was worried about how they were doing it. After the gathering, I returned to Arthur's office with the broken glasses. He had asked to examine them more closely, and I had finally agreed. I watched as he held the frames up to his desk lamp, turning them slowly, studying the construction with the focus of a man who knew exactly what he was looking for. "Rosemary had these custom-made," he said carefully, "through a friend of mine who specializes in security equipment. Surveillance technology mostly, corporate clients, high net worth individuals who need protection without visibility." He paused, adjusting his grip on the twisted metal. "Did she ever explain to you what was inside these frames?" I shook my head, my heart beginning to pound. "She said they would watch over me." I thought she was being poetic. Arthur's expression was unreadable as he held the broken frame up to the light. Something small glinted inside the metal, barely visible. tiny lens no larger than a grain of rice embedded in the joint where the temple met the front piece. "Walter," Arthur said slowly, his voice heavy with implication, "do you know what a covert recording device looks like?" I stared at the tiny lens glinting in the broken frame, my mind struggling to comprehend what Arthur was showing me. A recording device, hidden in the glasses Rosemary gave me on our anniversary. The glasses I had worn every day for 3 years through every meal, every conversation, every humiliation Madeline had inflicted. "I don't understand," I said, though I was beginning to understand all too well. Rosemary put a camera in my glasses. Arthur set the frames down gently and leaned back in his chair. Not just a camera, a micro camera with audio recording capability embedded in the frame joint. State-of-the-art technology, the kind used by private investigators and security professionals. It activates automatically when worn and stores footage to a wireless backup system. He paused, letting the information settle. Rosemary arranged everything through my contact in the security industry. She paid for 10 years of cloud storage and automatic backup. Every moment those glasses were on your face, Walter, they were recording. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Every dinner where Madeline had belittled me, every comment about my age, my usefulness, my place in the house, every whispered conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, all of it captured, preserved, stored somewhere beyond Madeline's reach. "But she broke them," I said, touching the twisted metal. "The night she snapped them in half, she destroyed the device." Arthur shook his head slowly, a faint smile crossing his face. "She destroyed the hardware, yes, but the footage had already been uploaded. The system backs up continuously to a secure server. Everything recorded up to the moment of destruction is preserved, including," he added meaningfully, "the destruction itself." I sat in stunned silence as Arthur explained the legal framework. Texas, he told me, is a one-party consent state. This means that as long as one person in a conversation consents to being recorded, the recording is legal. Since I was wearing the glasses, since I was present for every conversation captured, the footage was entirely admissible. "Rosemary thought of everything," Arthur said. "She knew the technology, she knew the law, she made sure that whatever evidence these glasses collected would hold up in court." He opened his laptop and began typing, accessing what he called the Secure Archive. Under Texas Human Resources Code, Chapter 48, what you've experienced constitutes elder abuse. Emotional abuse specifically, which includes verbal assaults, threats, intimidation, and humiliation. The footage shows a pattern of behavior designed to isolate you, demean you, and ultimately strip you of your autonomy. He looked at me with the gravity of a man delivering a verdict. Combined with the documents Nathan signed, the guardianship inquiry, and the emails you found about Patricia's treatment of her own mother, we have more than enough evidence to pursue criminal charges against Madeline. This isn't just family conflict, Walter. This is a prosecutable offense. Criminal charges. The words hung in the air between us. I thought of Madeline's confident smile, her casual cruelty, her absolute certainty that she was untouchable. I thought of Patricia coaching her from the sidelines, passing down techniques perfected on her own mother. They had believed they were dealing with a helpless old man, someone too weak and confused to fight back. They had no idea that my dying wife had turned my everyday eyewear into a silent witness, capturing every crime they committed against me. But I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. What I felt was awe deep and humbling at the woman I had been married to for 40 years. Rosemary had known this day would come. She had seen Madeline's true nature long before I had recognized the threat while I remained blind to it. And instead of warning me, instead of creating conflict that might have torn our family apart while she was still alive, she had quietly prepared. She had built defenses I would only discover when I needed them most. She had protected me from beyond the grave. She was always watching over me, I said softly, more to myself than to Arthur. Even when I thought I was alone, she was there. Arthur nodded, his expression gentle. "She loved you more than you know, Walter. This wasn't paranoia or obsession. This was a woman who understood exactly what her family would face after she was gone and who refused to leave you defenseless." Arthur turned the laptop toward me. "I think you should see some of the footage," he said carefully. "Not all of it, not yet, but enough to understand what we have." He clicked a file, and suddenly I was looking at myself on screen, sitting in the living room of my own home, the familiar surroundings rendered strange by the angle of the hidden camera. The timestamp showed a date from 3 weeks ago, an ordinary evening I barely remembered. Then Madeline's voice cut through the speakers, sharp and contemptuous. "You're nothing but a burden, Walter. Do you know that every day you shuffle around this house taking up space, eating food you didn't pay for, breathing air that would be better used by someone who actually contributes? When you're gone, no one will even notice. Nathan certainly won't miss you. He'll be relieved. We all will." On screen, I watched myself sit motionless, absorbing the words without response. I remembered that moment now, remembered the cold weight of her contempt settling over me like a shroud. I had said nothing because I believed silence was wisdom. I'd endured because I thought endurance was strength. Arthur paused the footage. "There's hours more," he said quietly. "Weeks of similar incidents. The night she broke the glasses is all there. Every word she said, every moment of the destruction. It's comprehensive, Walter. It's damning." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the collision of grief and gratitude crashing through my chest. Rosemary had captured it all. Every insult, every threat, every attempt to diminish me. She had known I would need proof, and she had made sure I would have it. "Thank you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to Arthur or to the woman I had lost 3 years ago. "Thank you for never giving up on me." I left Arthur's office that evening with a new understanding of the battlefield I was standing on. The footage changed everything. It transformed my position from a vulnerable old man defending himself against accusations of incompetence to a documented victim of systematic abuse. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Rosemary had taught me that structures need time to settle, that pressure applied too quickly causes collapse in unpredictable ways. I needed Madeline to continue making mistakes, to dig her hole deeper while believing she was building a fortress. So I did something she never anticipated. I disappeared. Not physically, not dramatically. I simply stopped being useful. The next morning, I didn't wake early to tend Rosemary's garden. I didn't prepare breakfast or start the coffee or sort the mail that accumulated by the door. I didn't remind Nathan about the utility bills coming due or mention that the kitchen faucet had been dripping for a week. I showered, dressed, and left the house before anyone else woke up. I spent the day at the public library downtown, reading newspapers and engineering journals, rediscovering the quiet pleasure of a mind engaged with ideas rather than survival. When I returned that evening, the breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The mail was still unopened, and Nathan was staring at a past due notice with bewilderment on his face. The pattern continued for days. I stopped cooking entirely, stopped cleaning, stopped performing any of the invisible labor that had kept the household functioning. I rose early and left, returning only to sleep in the room that had once been mine and Rosemary's. I took my meals elsewhere, sandwiches from a deli near Arthur's office, soup from a cafe beside the library. The house I had maintained for 40 years began to show the strain of my absence. Dust gathered on surfaces I used to polish. The lawn grew shaggy without my weekly attention. Small repairs I would have handled automatically. A loose doorknob, a flickering light bulb went unaddressed and multiplied into larger annoyances. Nathan noticed first. He cornered me one evening as I was heading to my room, confusion and frustration warring on his face. "Dad, what's going on? The house is falling apart. Bills are piling up. Madeline is asking questions I don't have answers to." I looked at my son, this man who had watched his wife break my glasses without saying a word, and I felt something close to pity. "You're 45 years old, Nathan. I'm sure you can figure out how to pay a utility bill." He stared at me as though I had spoken a foreign language. It occurred to me that he had never truly understood how much I did, how many small tasks I performed each day without acknowledgement or thanks. He had taken my labor for granted, the way one takes gravity for granted, assuming it would always be there, never questioning what held everything in place. Madeline's response was different. She had expected confrontation, had prepared for a fight she was confident of winning. My withdrawal confused her in ways that made her careless. I learned from Arthur that she had begun calling banks, attempting to access accounts that were protected by the trust. Each call triggered a flag in the system Arthur monitored. She tried to schedule the psychiatric evaluation she had been planning, but without my cooperation, without my presence, the process stalled. She couldn't prove I was incompetent if I wasn't there to be evaluated. My absence became a void she couldn't fill, a problem she couldn't solve with intimidation or manipulation. For the first time since she entered this family, Madeline was not in control. I spent most of my days at Arthur's office now, reviewing documents, discussing strategy, preparing for the confrontation we both knew was coming. It was during one of these visits that I noticed something I had overlooked before. Arthur kept a photograph on his desk, a picture of Rosemary from decades ago before I knew her. She was young in the image, perhaps 25, laughing at something outside the frame. I had seen the photo many times, but never really looked at it. Now I saw the way Arthur glanced at it when he thought I wasn't watching the softness that crossed his face, the way his hand sometimes drifted toward the frame before pulling back. "You knew her well," I said one afternoon, breaking a comfortable silence. Arthur looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "Rosemary was my client for many years. We worked closely together." I held his gaze. "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a long moment, weighing something in his mind. Then he said very carefully, "We knew each other before you did, Walter. A long time ago in another life." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. But something passed between us in that moment, an acknowledgement of depths I had not yet explored. There were layers to my wife's past, to her relationship with this man, that I was only beginning to understand. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening. I returned to the house later than usual and found Madeline waiting in the living room, her arms crossed, her face tight with barely contained fury. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "What do you think you're doing, disappearing every day, neglecting this house, leaving Nathan to deal with everything?" I looked at her, this woman who had broken my glasses and called me a burden, who had plotted to have me declared incompetent, who had learned cruelty at her mother's knee. I felt no anger anymore, only a vast, quiet certainty. "You wanted control," I said simply, my voice calm, my eyes meeting hers without flinching. "Now live with it." I walked past her toward the door, collecting my jacket from the hook where it hung. She sputtered something behind me, threats or demands, I didn't bother to distinguish which. I opened the door and stepped into the evening air, leaving her standing in the house she thought she owned, surrounded by the chaos she had created. Arthur called me the next morning before dawn. His voice carried a weight I recognized immediately, the gravity of something long awaited finally arriving. "The conditions have been met," he said simply. "It's time, Walter. Come to my office." I dressed in the gray light of early morning, my hands steady despite the anticipation coursing through me. 3 years of grief, weeks of revelation, and now the final piece of Rosemary's design was about to be revealed. I drove through empty streets, the city still sleeping around me, and arrived at Arthur's building just as the sun began to paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. He was waiting at his desk, the laptop open before him, a single file icon visible on the screen. The room felt different somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't name. Arthur gestured to the chair beside him rather than across the desk. "Rosemary recorded this message 2 weeks before she died," he said quietly. "She made me promise not to show it until we had documented evidence of the abuse she predicted would come. The footage from the glasses, the emails, the guardianship scheme, all of it confirms what she feared." He paused, his hand hovering over the keyboard. "Are you ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Arthur clicked the file and suddenly Rosemary filled the screen. My breath caught in my throat. She was lying in a hospital bed, propped up by pillows, her face thin and pale from the cancer that was stealing her from me. But her eyes, those sharp, loving eyes that had seen me through 40 years of marriage, they were clear and fierce, burning with an intensity that transcended her failing body. I gripped the arm of my chair, overwhelmed by the simple miracle of seeing her move, hearing her breathe, watching the subtle expressions I had memorized across a lifetime together. "My love," she began, her voice weaker than I remembered, but steady nonetheless. "If you're watching this, then I was right about Madeline. I'm sorry I never told you what I saw. I know you, Walter. I know your faith in family, your belief that love can transform anyone. I didn't want to destroy that faith. I didn't want to hurt you with suspicions you would have dismissed as the fears of a sick woman." She paused, gathering strength. "But I couldn't leave you unprotected either, so I prepared." Tears were already forming in my eyes, but I couldn't look away. Rosemary continued, her gaze seeming to reach through the screen and find me directly. "I knew from their wedding day, Walter. I watched Madeline during the ceremony and I saw it clearly. She didn't love Nathan. She loved what our family represented, the security, the assets, the future she could extract from us. I saw how she looked at our home, how she cataloged our possessions, how she smiled at you with calculation behind her eyes. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was wrong. But I've never been wrong about people, and I knew I wasn't wrong about her. She shifted slightly in the bed, wincing at some pain she was trying to hide. Everything is in the trust, my love. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it protected under structures Arthur helped me design. Madeline signed documents when she moved in agreeing to terms she never read because she assumed they were formalities. Those terms include provisions for what happens if you are ever mistreated, exploited, or abused. If she has violated those terms, and by now she surely has, she loses everything. Every claim she thought she was building, every scheme she was constructing, it all collapses the moment we invoke the protective clauses. I was weeping openly now, tears streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of awe, of gratitude, of a love so profound it had survived death itself. My wife, dying in a hospital bed, had spent her final weeks not grieving, but fighting. She had built a fortress around me with her last breath, constructed defenses I would only discover when I needed them most. Even facing her own mortality, she had been thinking of me, protecting me, loving me with a ferocity that transcended the boundary between life and death. Rosemary's image flickered slightly, the recording quality wavering for a moment before stabilizing. I couldn't protect you while I was alive, Walter. I was too weak, too sick, too afraid of causing conflict when I should have been resting, but I could build walls around you from here. I could leave you weapons you would find when the battle began. Arthur knows everything. Trust him as you trust me. He will guide you through what comes next. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes glistening with tears of her own. One more thing, my love. The glasses weren't just for evidence. They were my way of being there, of watching over you every single day. Every time you put them on, I was with you. I saw what you saw. I heard what you heard. I was there for every moment, even when you thought you were alone. Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. Don't mourn too long, Walter. Don't let grief make you small again. I didn't build all of this so you could hide. I built it so you could fight, finish what I started, reclaim your dignity, and know that wherever I am proud of the man you are becoming. The screen went dark. Arthur said nothing, letting the silence hold space for what I was feeling. I sat motionless, tears still falling, my heart so full of love and loss and fierce determination that I thought it might burst. Rosemary had seen everything. She had known everything, and she had prepared for everything with the same meticulous care she brought to every challenge we ever faced together. She loved you beyond measure, Arthur said softly. I've never seen anything like what she built for you, Walter. It took her months to design, to document, to ensure every piece was legally sound. She was dying, and she spent that time making sure you would be safe. I wiped my eyes and looked at the blank screen where my wife's face had been. I won't let her down, I said, my voice rough but certain. Everything she built, everything she sacrificed, I will honor it. Madeline has no idea what's coming. I spent the following days preparing with Arthur, organizing the evidence, reviewing the legal strategies Rosemary had outlined. The footage from the glasses, the emails documenting generational exploitation, the trust documents with their protective clauses, all of it formed a case that grew stronger with each passing hour. But I had not anticipated how quickly Madeline would escalate, nor had I foreseen what would happen when she finally pushed Nathan too far. It was late afternoon when Nathan appeared at Arthur's office. I hadn't seen my son in nearly a week, not since I had walked out of the house and left Madeline standing in her self-created chaos. He looked different, somehow older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders carrying a weight I recognized as conscience, finally awakening. Arthur excused himself to give us privacy, closing the door softly behind him. Nathan stood in the middle of the room, unable to meet my eyes, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. She found a doctor, Nathan said without preamble. A psychiatrist willing to sign papers saying you show signs of cognitive decline. Memory issues, confusion, inability to manage daily affairs. He swallowed hard. She's been planning this for weeks, Dad. She wanted me to file for guardianship to become your legal guardian so we could control your finances, your health care, everything. The words hung in the air between us, confirmation of what Arthur and I had suspected, spoken aloud by the last person I expected to deliver it. I said nothing, waiting. Nathan continued, his voice growing steadier as confession poured out of him. She presented me with the papers this morning, said it was for your own good, that you were clearly losing your mind, that disappearing every day and neglecting the house proved you couldn't take care of yourself. She had everything prepared, the doctor's evaluation, the court forms. All I had to do was sign. He finally looked at me, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. She put the pen in my hand, Dad. She stood over me and told me to sign. And I almost did. I almost let her make me do it. What stopped you? I asked quietly. Nathan's face crumpled. Mom? I heard Mom's voice in my head clear as if she was standing right there. The last thing she ever said to me before she died. She made me promise Dad. She held my hand and looked right into my eyes and said, "Never let anyone take your father's dignity. Whatever happens after I'm gone, protect him." I forgot that promise. I buried it under fear and weakness and Madeline's constant pressure. But standing there with that pen in my hand, I finally remembered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. There's something else, something Madeline doesn't know. He set the phone on Arthur's desk and opened an app, the voice memo application he had mentioned weeks ago when he was learning to use his new device. I've been recording our conversations for the past 10 days. Every time she talked about you, about the house, about her plans, it's all here. He pressed play and Madeline's voice filled the room, sharp and impatient. The doctor is ready to sign off. All we need is Nathan's signature as petitioner and the old man becomes our responsibility. We can move him to a facility within the month, sell the house by summer. He won't even understand what's happening by then. Another recording followed Madeline coaching Nathan on what to say to the judge if questioned. Then another, her laughing about how easy it was to find medical professionals willing to diagnose whatever you paid them to diagnose. Each clip was a nail in the coffin she had been building for me, now repurposed for her own burial. Nathan stopped the playback. There's hours more. Everything she said about the guardianship, the fake doctor, her plans to put you away. I recorded it all. He looked at me with something desperate in his expression, a plea for forgiveness he didn't know how to ask for directly. When I refused to sign, she lost control. Started screaming that she would file the papers herself, that she didn't need me, that I was as useless as you were. And then he paused, something shifting in his face. She got sick. Right in the middle of her tirade, ran to the bathroom and vomited. I've noticed it happening more often lately, the nausea, the fatigue, the way she's been avoiding alcohol for weeks. My heart contracted. Nathan, is she? He nodded slowly. I asked her directly. She didn't deny it. She's pregnant, Dad. She's carrying my child, and she still wanted me to help her destroy you. The weight of that revelation settled over both of us. A grandchild. Rosemary's blood continuing into another generation, but growing inside a woman who had just tried to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized. Nathan straightened some of the weakness I had seen in him for years, finally beginning to recede. I'm not signing anything. I told her that. She threatened me, said she would expose what happened 15 years ago, the money I lost, the shame of it. I told her I didn't care anymore. I told her I would rather face that shame than betray my father again. He moved toward the door, then turned back. She's going to come after you harder now, Dad. She knows I'm not on her side anymore. But I have the recordings. I have proof of everything she planned, and I'm not going to look away this time. I stood and crossed the room to where my son waited. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, all the years of disappointment and distance and unspoken hurt passing between us. Then I put my hand on his shoulder. Your mother would be proud of you, I said. It took longer than she hoped, but you finally remembered who you are. Nathan's eyes filled with tears again, but he didn't look away. I'm going to make it right, Dad. Whatever it takes. He opened the door and stepped out. Phone in his pocket, his mother's voice echoing in his mind. I watched him go, this son who had finally chosen to stand, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope that the man I raised might still exist beneath all those layers of fear and compromise. Hope that Rosemary's faith in him had not been entirely misplaced. Madeline scheduled the family meeting for Sunday afternoon, sending formal invitations as though she were hosting a charity gala rather than orchestrating my destruction. She invited her parents, a handful of neighbors she had cultivated as witnesses, and even the family accountant, people she believed would lend credibility to the guardianship petition she planned to present as a compassionate family decision. She chose the living room of the house Rosemary and I had built together, arranging chairs in a semicircle facing the fireplace where she would stand and deliver her performance. She had no idea that Arthur and I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, that Nathan had already made his choice, that every piece of her carefully constructed scheme was about to collapse around her. I arrived early, taking my usual seat by the window, the same chair where Rosemary used to read in the evenings. The guests filtered in over the next half hour, Patricia and Frank settling into positions of prominence near the front, the neighbors exchanging awkward pleasantries, everyone sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Nathan came in last, his face carefully neutral, his phone resting in his jacket pocket. He caught my eye briefly and gave an almost imperceptible nod. We were ready. Madeline began her presentation with practiced concern, speaking of her worry for my well-being, my recent erratic behavior, my withdrawal from family life. She painted a picture of a confused old man wandering the streets, neglecting his responsibilities, possibly suffering from early dementia. She referenced the doctor she had consulted, the professional opinion that I might no longer be capable of managing my own affairs. She proposed with great reluctance and heavy heart that the family consider a guardianship arrangement with herself and Nathan as co-guardians to ensure I received the care I deserved. Several of the neighbors nodded sympathetically. Patricia watched with the cool approval of a mentor observing a student's final exam. The doorbell rang. Madeline frowned clearly, not expecting additional guests. Nathan moved to answer it, and a moment later Arthur Whitman walked into the living room. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the calm expression of a man who had been waiting a very long time for this moment. "My apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "I'm Arthur Whitman, legal representative for the Rosemary Bennett Living Trust. I believe this gathering concerns my client's interests, and I have documentation that should be presented before any decisions are made." Madeline's composure flickered. "This is a private family matter. You have no right to be here." Arthur smiled politely. "On the contrary, the trust grants me explicit authority to intervene in any proceedings that threaten the beneficiary's welfare. And I have evidence that suggests this meeting is not what it appears to be." He opened his briefcase and withdrew a laptop, setting it on the coffee table and turning it so the screen faced the assembled guests. "What I'm about to show you was recorded over the past several months by a device Mrs. Rosemary Bennett had installed before her death. Texas is a one-party consent state, and Mr. Bennett was present for all conversations captured. This footage is legally obtained and fully admissible." He pressed play. The room watched in growing horror as scene after scene unfolded on the screen. Madeline berating me at dinner, calling me a burden, telling me no one would notice when I was gone. Madeline breaking my glasses, her voice sharp and cruel as she told me to learn my place. Madeline discussing finances with Nathan, her contempt for me barely concealed. The footage was comprehensive, devastating, and undeniable. Several of the neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The accountant stared at Madeline with dawning disgust. Patricia's face had gone very still. When Arthur stopped the playback, Nathan stood. "There's more," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. He pulled out his phone and opened the voice memo app. "My wife has been planning this guardianship scheme for months. She found a doctor willing to fabricate a diagnosis. She coached me on what to say to the court. She talked about selling this house before my father even understood what was happening." He pressed play, and Madeline's voice filled the room again, this time from recordings made just days ago. Her plans laid bare, her manipulation exposed, her contempt for me captured in her own words. Madeline's face had gone white. She looked around the room, desperately searching for an ally, finding only averted gazes and expressions of revulsion. Her eyes landed on her mother. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. You know what we were trying to do. You helped me plan." Patricia stood abruptly, cutting her daughter off. Her face was a mask of cold disappointment. "I taught you control, Madeline. I taught you patience and strategy, but you let yourself be controlled by greed. You pushed too hard, too fast, exactly what I warned you against." She gathered her purse and moved toward the door, not looking back. "I told you to be careful. You didn't listen. You made this mess. Clean it yourself." Frank rose and followed his wife without a word, his face tight with the embarrassment of a man whose investment had publicly failed. The neighbors began making excuses, gathering their things, desperate to escape the wreckage of what they had witnessed. Within minutes, the room had emptied of everyone except Arthur, Nathan, Madeline, and me. She stood alone in the center of the floor, surrounded by chairs that had held her witnesses, her supporters, her carefully assembled audience. All of them gone, all of them turned away. "This isn't over," Madeline hissed, her voice trembling with fury and fear. "I'll fight this. I'll tell everyone these recordings were faked, manipulated. No one will believe." everyone already believes," Arthur interrupted calmly. "They saw your face when you heard your own voice. They watched your mother abandon you. The evidence is overwhelming, Mrs. Bennett, and it will only grow stronger as we proceed with our legal response to your guardianship petition." I had remained silent throughout the confrontation, watching the structure Madeline had built crumble exactly as Rosemary had predicted it would. Now I spoke, my voice quiet but carrying clearly in the devastated room. "It was never about the glasses, Madeline. It was about what you revealed when you thought no one was watching. Every word you said, every scheme you constructed, every cruelty you inflicted, you did it believing you were invisible, untouchable. But Rosemary saw you. She always saw you. And now everyone else does too." The days following the family meeting moved with the strange momentum of an avalanche. Once the first stone had shifted, everything else followed with unstoppable force. Arthur worked quickly, filing formal charges with the county district attorney's office before Madeline could mount any kind of defense or counter-narrative. Elder abuse under Texas Human Resources Code. Chapter 48. Attempted fraud through the falsified guardianship petition. Conspiracy to falsify medical documents. The psychiatrist who had agreed to sign papers diagnosing my cognitive decline found himself reported to the Texas Medical Board, his license under review, his reputation in ruins before he even understood what had happened. Arthur was thorough in ways that reminded me of Rosemary, methodical and precise, leaving no loose thread unpulled. The legal proceedings would take months, Arthur warned me, but the immediate consequences were already devastating. Madeline's world collapsed with remarkable speed. The neighbors who had attended the family meeting talked as neighbors always do, and within a week, the story had spread through every corner of our community. The woman who had positioned herself as a devoted daughter-in-law, caring for her aging father-in-law, was now exposed as a predator who had schemed to have him institutionalized and stripped of his autonomy. Friends who had once admired her ambition now crossed the street to avoid her. Professional contacts stopped returning her calls. The real estate agency where she worked placed her on indefinite leave pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. She had spent years cultivating an image of competence and respectability, and it had evaporated in a single afternoon, replaced by whispered warnings and cautionary tales. "Don't be like Madeline Bennett. Don't let greed make you stupid." Patricia and Frank disappeared entirely, retreating to whatever comfortable distance wealthy people maintain when scandal threatens to splash onto their carefully curated lives. I heard through Arthur that Patricia had already begun telling anyone who would listen that she had always had concerns about Madeline's judgment, that she had tried to counsel moderation, that she couldn't be held responsible for a daughter who refused to listen. The woman who had taught Madeline to exploit the elderly was now rewriting history to protect herself, sacrificing her own child to preserve her reputation. The apple, I realized, had not fallen far from the tree. It had simply fallen into a spotlight Patricia had been careful to avoid. Nathan moved through these days like a man waking from a long illness. He stayed in the house, though Madeline had effectively abandoned it, retreating to a hotel while she consulted lawyers and plotted whatever defense she thought she could mount. The marriage was over in every way that mattered. Whatever documents remained unsigned, whatever legal formalities awaited the partnership they had built, was as broken as the glasses Madeline had shattered weeks ago. Nathan didn't speak much about it. He didn't need to. I watched him moving through rooms that had once belonged to his mother, touching objects Rosemary had chosen, and I saw something shifting behind his eyes. He was remembering who he used to be before fear and compromise had hollowed him out. One evening, he found me in the garden tending Rosemary's roses as the sun set behind the oak trees. He stood beside me for a long moment, neither of us speaking, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds settling for the night. Then he said quietly, "I should have done this years ago. I should have stood up when it mattered. I should have protected you the way you always protected me." I didn't look at him. I just kept working the soil, feeling the earth cool beneath my fingers. "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. But it was a beginning. Arthur came by later that week to review the status of the legal proceedings. We sat in the living room, the same room where Madeline had planned her triumphant guardianship announcement, now quiet and still. He outlined the charges, the timeline, the likely outcomes. Madeline faced potential prison time if convicted, though more likely she would accept a plea deal that would spare her incarceration in exchange for restitution and probation. The trust protections Rosemary had established remained fully intact. The house, the savings, everything was secure. I had won. But sitting there listening to Arthur describe the systematic destruction of a woman who had once been part of my family, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a deep bone-weary exhaustion and a sadness I couldn't quite name. I didn't want to destroy her, I said, finally interrupting Arthur's legal summary. He looked at me with understanding in his eyes. I know, Walter. I stared at Rosemary's photograph on the mantel, her smile frozen in time, her eyes somehow still watching over me. I just wanted to stop being destroyed. That night after Arthur left and Nathan retreated to his room, I sat alone in the quiet house with Rosemary's photograph in my hands. The battle was over. The evidence had been presented, the allies had scattered, the schemes had collapsed. I had won. But victory, I realized, tastes different when it comes at the cost of your son's marriage and a family you once hoped would love you. I held my wife's image close and whispered into the darkness. Was this what you wanted, Rosemary? Was this the ending you planned? The photograph offered no answer, only silence and the weight of everything that had been lost along the way. A week passed before I made my decision. Arthur had laid out my options with his usual precision, explaining that the trust gave me absolute authority over the next steps. I could evict Madeline from the house, immediately forcing her onto the streets with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. I could press the district attorney to pursue maximum charges, ensuring she faced years of legal battles and potential imprisonment. I could strip away every protection, every mercy, every second chance, and watch her life crumble the way she had planned to crumble mine. I held all the cards. For the first time since Rosemary died, I had complete control over my own fate and the fate of those who had tried to destroy me. But something kept me from playing those cards, something beyond strategy or wisdom, or even the exhaustion that had settled into my bones. Nathan came to me one evening, his face drawn with a weight I recognized as impending fatherhood colliding with moral catastrophe. He sat across from me in the living room, the same chairs where so much had already been decided, and confirmed what I had suspected since the family meeting. The pregnancy is real, Dad. I went with her to the doctor yesterday. She's 3 months along. It's definitely mine. He paused, struggling with words that seemed inadequate for the complexity of what he was feeling. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be a father to a child whose mother tried to have my own father institutionalized. I looked at my son, this man who had finally found his courage after decades of hiding from it, and I thought about Rosemary. I thought about the grandchild she would never meet, the continuation of her bloodline growing inside a woman who had tried to erase her memory from this house. I thought about what my wife would have wanted, what she would have counseled if she could speak to me from wherever she was watching. Rosemary had built walls around me, but she had never been cruel. She had prepared weapons, but she had never sought destruction for its own sake. She believed in consequences, yes, but she also believed in redemption. She would not have wanted her grandchild to pay for sins committed before they were even born. I asked Arthur to arrange a meeting. Madeline arrived at the house looking smaller than I had ever seen her, the confidence that had defined her stripped away, replaced by something that might have been fear or might have been calculation. I could no longer tell the difference with her. Perhaps there was no difference. She sat on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped over her still flat stomach, and waited for me to pronounce her sentence. I don't forgive you. I began, my voice steady and clear. I may never forgive you. What you did, what you planned to do, it was beyond cruelty. You tried to take everything from me, including my own mind. I saw her flinch at the words, but I continued without pause. However, the child you're carrying is part of Rosemary. That child is my grandchild, the only grandchild I may ever have, and I will not punish an innocent life for your sins. I laid out the terms Arthur and I had drafted. 6 months of demonstrated change, mandatory counseling with a therapist of Arthur's choosing, complete transparency in all financial matters, regular accountability meetings where she would answer for her actions and show evidence of genuine transformation. If she complied, the criminal charges would be reduced to probation. If she failed, if she showed any sign of returning to her old patterns, the full weight of the law would fall upon her without mercy. Madeline listened in silence, tears beginning to stream down her face. Whether they were tears of relief, tears of manipulation, or tears of some genuine emotion she had buried beneath years of scheming, I couldn't say. Perhaps even she didn't know. I turned to Nathan, who had been standing near the doorway throughout my pronouncement. And you, I said, meeting his eyes directly. You can stay or go. That's your choice to make. But if you stay as my son, not as her excuse. You don't get to hide behind her anymore, and she doesn't get to use you as a shield. You choose who you want to be, Nathan. Not tomorrow. Today. Nathan nodded slowly, something resolving in his expression. I'll stay Dad, not for her, for the family we should have been all along. Madeline looked at me, tears still falling, her voice barely a whisper. Why? After everything I did, why would you offer me anything at all? I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain, who had schemed and manipulated and very nearly succeeded in destroying me, and I answered the only way I could. Because Rosemary would have wanted her grandchild to have a chance, even if the mother doesn't deserve one. 6 months passed, like water finding its level, settling into new patterns, carving new channels through terrain that had once seemed immovable. The house that had been a battlefield slowly transformed into something resembling a home again. Madeline complied with the terms I had set grudgingly at first, then with something approaching genuine effort as the months wore on. She attended her counseling sessions without complaint, submitted to the financial transparency Arthur required, and conducted herself with a civility that, while never warm, at least acknowledged the boundaries she had violated. Her belly grew round with the child she carried, my grandchild Rosemary's legacy, continuing into a future none of us had anticipated. I watched her, sometimes this woman who had caused so much pain, and I searched for signs of the predator she had been. What I found instead was a person diminished, humbled, possibly even changed. Whether the transformation was genuine or merely another performance, only time would tell. But I had learned to wait. Patience. Rosemary had taught me reveals everything eventually. Nathan and I rebuilt our relationship one conversation at a time, one shared meal at a time, one quiet evening in the garden at a time. We didn't speak much about what had happened. We didn't need to. The past was a country we had both escaped from, and dwelling there served no purpose. Instead, we talked about the future, about the baby coming, about the kind of grandfather I hoped to be, and the kind of father he was determined to become. He had changed in ways I hadn't thought possible, the weakness that had defined him for so long, replaced by a steadiness that reminded me of who he used to be before Madeline, before fear, before all the compromises that had nearly cost us both everything. He would never be the son I had imagined, but he was becoming the son he was meant to be. That was enough. I reclaimed my life in pieces like a man reassembling a structure that had collapsed. I tended Rosemary's garden every morning, nurturing the roses she had planted, talking to her as I always had. But I no longer spoke only of grief and loss. I told her about the baby coming, about Nathan's progress, about the small victories and quiet joys that filled my days. I began volunteering at a senior center downtown, offering guidance to others facing situations like mine, people whose families had turned against them, whose trust had been exploited, whose dignity had been stripped away by those who should have protected them. I couldn't undo what had happened to me, but I could help others navigate their own battles. It gave me purpose beyond survival, meaning beyond revenge. Arthur came by one afternoon in late spring when the roses were blooming their brightest and the Texas heat was still gentle enough to enjoy. We sat on the porch together, two old men watching the day unfold, comfortable in a silence built over months of shared purpose. After a long while, Arthur spoke, his voice carrying a weight I had never heard from him before. Walter, there's something I never told you. Something I should have said a long time ago. I turned to look at him, waiting. His eyes were fixed on some distant point, seeing something beyond the garden, beyond the years. Rosemary and I were in love once, he said quietly. A long time ago, before she met you. We were young, both just starting our careers, and I thought she was the most remarkable woman I had ever known. I wanted to marry her. I was certain she felt the same. He paused, the memory clearly painful, even after so many decades. Then she met you, and everything changed. She chose you, Walter. Without hesitation, without regret. She told me that you were the man she was meant to be with, and I had to accept it. His voice broke slightly. I respected that choice for the rest of my life, but I never stopped loving her. I let his words settle in the warm afternoon air. Then I said something that clearly surprised him. I know, Arthur. She told me years ago. She said you were the only man she had ever loved before me, and the only man she trusted as much as me. I saw the shock in his eyes, the realization that Rosemary had kept no secrets from either of us. That's why she gave you the trust, the video, all of it. because she knew you would protect me. Not for my sake, but for hers. Arthur's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down his weathered cheeks, the grief of decades breaking through the dam he had built around it. I never stopped loving her, he whispered, but loving her meant protecting what she loved most. It meant protecting you. I reached over and placed my hand on his shoulder. Two old men bonded by the same woman, the same loss, the same quiet dignity that had sustained us both through impossible years. We sat together as the sun moved across the sky, saying nothing more, needing nothing more. The next morning I drove to the cemetery where Rosemary rests. I carried fresh roses from her garden, red and white blooms she would have loved, and placed them carefully in the vase beside her headstone. I wore new glasses now, simple frames with ordinary lenses. No hidden cameras, no secret recordings. I didn't need them anymore. The battle was over, the victory was complete. What remained was simply living, simply being the man she had always believed I could be. You taught me that kindness without boundaries is an invitation to be used, I said softly, speaking to her as I always did. But you also taught me that strength without mercy is just cruelty. I tried to find the balance, Rosemary. I tried to honor what you built without becoming something you wouldn't recognize. I hope I got it right. The wind stirred the roses around me, carrying their fragrance through the morning air. I stood in the warm Texas sunlight, feeling it wash over my face like a blessing, like forgiveness, like love that transcends even death. I had lost my glasses that night when Madeline broke them. I had lost years to silence and grief and the slow erosion of my own dignity. But standing there in Rosemary's garden of memory, surrounded by the roses she had planted and the legacy she had left behind, I finally understood what she had been trying to teach me all along. I didn't lose my glasses. I reclaimed my dignity. Walter Bennett's story reminds us that silence is not always weakness, and patience is not always surrender. Sometimes the quietest people are simply waiting for the right moment to reveal a strength that others never saw coming. Rosemary's love reached beyond the grave to protect the man she cherished, proving that true love doesn't end with death. It transforms into something even more powerful. And Walter, the man everyone underestimated, taught us that dignity cannot be taken unless we allow it to be given away. He showed us that revenge doesn't have to be cruel to be complete, that justice can be served with mercy, and that even in our darkest moments, we can choose to be better than those who hurt us. If this story touched your heart, if you found yourself cheering for Walter and moved by Rosemary's incredible foresight, please take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Your comments mean the world to us. So tell us in the section below, what moment affected you the most? Was it the revelation about the glasses, Nathan's redemption, Arthur's secret love? We read every single comment and love hearing your thoughts. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of courage, justice, and the unbreakable human spirit. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your support keeps these stories alive, and together we prove that dignity will always triumph over cruelty.